My name is Nia Brooks. I am 30 years old. 6 months ago, I lost my home. And when I called my family for help, my stepfather said 5 words I will never forget. Not our problem. Be careful. But that was not the worst part. The worst part came a week later when my insurance company told me my policy had one beneficiary. Not me. My mother and stepfather. A policy I never signed. And 3 days after that, a fire investigator asked me one simple question that changed everything. Who had access to your apartment last week? I knew the answer. My mother had visited for the first time in 2 years. Before I continue, do this one thing for me. If you have ever been blamed for something you did not do, type I know in the comments and tell me where you are watching from tonight. Now let me take you back to the night everything changed. It was February 12th, 3:17. A.M., the smoke alarm screamed like it was trying to rip my ceiling down at first. I thought it was a dream. Then the air hit my throat, hot, bitter, chemical. My eyes opened into darkness so thick it felt solid. I swung my legs off the bed and my feet touched the floor. It was warm, not the normal warmth of a heater. The wrong warm. Fire does not ask permission. It just arrives. I grabbed my phone without thinking and ran. No shoes, no coat, just thin pajamas and panic. When I opened my bedroom door, the hallway looked like a tunnel made of smoke. Orange light pulsed from somewhere below, like a heartbeat. I slammed into the stairwell door with my shoulder, and it flew open. I started down the stairs, coughing so hard I tasted metal. 4 flights down, every step felt like a bargain with God. Just let me reach the bottom. Just let me breathe. When I pushed through the final door, cold air slapped my face. The winter night felt cruel, but clean. I stumbled onto the sidewalk and turned around. Flames poured out of my 4th floor window. Unit 4B, my home. A firefighter approached me, helmet soot, eyes that have seen too much. Ma'am, are you the president? I nodded, but no sound came out. His face tightened just a little. I'm sorry. Everything in that unit is gone. Gone. 7 years of my life, reduced to smoke and black water and floating ash. Photos of my grandma. My college diploma. My laptop with every project I ever worked on. A cheap guitar I taught myself on when I was lonely. Letters I kept because I could not throw them away. My whole life, stacked in boxers inside a small apartment. I sank onto the curb, still holding my phone like it was a lifeline. Neighbors stood around in robes and slippers. Someone put a blanket on my shoulders. I never even saw who. The screen on my phone read 3:47 a.m. I opened my contacts. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped it. Mom. Family means you can call at 3:47 a.m. and not feel guilty. That is what I used. To believe, I pressed call. It rang and rang. On the 8th ring, she picked up. Nia. My mother's voice sounded thick with sleep, and something else. Annoyance. Do you know what time it is? My throat tightened. Mom, there was a fire. My apartment burned. I lost everything. I don't have anywhere to go. There was a pause. Long, empty. Then she exhaled like I had asked her to pick me up from the airport. Oh, another pause. That's unfortunate. Unfortunate. Like I dropped a glass. Like my life was a minor inconvenience. I heard movement, rustling. Then my stepfather's voice. My mother handed him the phone. Nia, what happened? I told him again. The fire, the smoke. Standing outside with nothing but my phone and thin cotton pajamas. I was crying now. I could hear it in my voice and it made me feel weak, which made me cry harder. His response came flat, final. This isn't our problem. You should have been more careful. You're an adult now. Click. The line went dead. I sat on the curb with the phone pressed to my ear, listening to silence like it might turn into love if I listened long enough. Around me, the fire trucks kept moving. Water sprayed. Glass shattered. Someone shouted instructions. And the sun started to rise, painting the smoke a sick orange dot. My family did not ask if I was hurt. They did not ask if I was safe. They did not ask where I was going to sleep. Not our problem. As shock hardened into something colder, a memory surfaced. 5 days before the fire, my mother had shown up at my apartment. Her first visit in 2 years, she arrived unannounced, smiling too wide, saying, "I missed you." Like we were normal. She walked through my rooms, touching things, asking questions, looking in corners. I had been happy, grateful, even now wrapped in a stranger's blanket. Watching my life burn, I wondered, why did she really come? My coworker saved me that first week. Her name is Kayla. She is the kind of person who gives without making you feel like you owe her your soul. When I showed up at her place at 6 a.m. with ash in my hair and nothing but my phone, she did not ask for details. She just handed me a mug of tea and said, "You can breathe here." 3 days later, I finally had enough strength to call my insurance company. I expected paperwork, waiting, a polite voice telling me, "We'll get back to you." Instead, the customer service rep asked something strange. "Ms. Brooks, can you confirm your relationship with Renee and Howard Brooks?" I stared at the borrowed laptop on Kayla's kitchen table. My mother and stepfather. Why? Silence. Too long. "Miss Brooks, I think you should come into the office. There's something you need to see. Can't you tell me on the phone?" Mother. Pause. "It would be better in person." After I hung up, I sat there staring at the wall. The way you stare when your body already knows the truth, but your mind refuses to accept it. Kayla came in from her shift and saw my face. "What's wrong?" "The insurance company said something about my parents and a beneficiary form." Kayla frowned. "A beneficiary on renter's insurance. I know." That night, I barely slept, because deep down, a quiet voice kept repeating, "Something is wrong, and it is not small." The insurance office smelled like stale coffee and bad news. The rep, a young man named Darren, led me into a small conference room and closed the door. "I'm sorry about your loss." He started to show me, I said. My voice surprised me. It sounded calm. He slid a folder across the table. My policy, coverage amounts, dates, then the last page. Beneficiary designation, Nia Brooks, Howard Brooks, 100%. The room tilted. "This is wrong," I whispered. "I never signed this." Darren pointed to the bottom of the page. "That's your signature." I looked. It looked like mine. The loops, the slant, the way the last letter curved. But my stomach knew what my eyes could not prove. I had never signed that paper. "This form was submitted 6 months ago," Darren said quietly. "The original policy listed you as the default beneficiary. Someone changed it. How much is the payout?" He swallowed. 150,000. My mouth went dry. Then he said, "There's something else. A fire investigator called us. He asked about your policy. He asked about the beneficiary change." My hands started shaking. Why would a fire investigator care about the beneficiary? Darren held my eyes. "I think you know." I did. The truth sat in my chest like a stone. Someone forged my signature. Someone changed my policy. And then my apartment burned. 5 days before it burned, my mother visited. I stopped believing in coincidences. The fire investigator met me at a quiet cafe. His name was Ben Alvarez. Weathered face, sharp eyes, a voice that did not waste words. He set down his coffee. "I'll be direct. I don't think your fire was an accident." The air between us thickened. "What makes you say that?" He showed me photos I did not want to see. My bedroom, blackened walls, charred outlet. "The point of origin is here," he said. "But there's no sign of an electrical failure. No frayed wire. No surge damage." I swallowed. "So what does that mean?" "It means someone helped that fire along." I stared at the table. "Who would do that?" Ben leaned forward slightly, like he already knew the answer but needed me to step into it. "Who had access to your apartment in the week before the fire?" My heart stopped and restarted too fast. My mother visited, I said. Ben did not react. He nodded slowly, like a puzzle piece clicked into place. We checked the building access logs. Only 2 entries that week, yours and a woman matching your mother's description. My throat tightened. Ben's voice softened just a little. I'm not accusing anyone yet, but this investigation is active. If there's anything else you know, now is the time. I thought about the forged signature. There is, I said. That night, I called my mother. I kept my voice light. Mom, I just wanted to say thanks again for visiting. It meant a lot. A pause. Oh yes, sweetie, I missed you. I picked at the edge of Kayla's couch. Quick question. Did you notice anything weird in my apartment? The investigator keeps asking. Her tone sharpened instantly. Investigator? Why is there an investigator? They think it might not be an accident. Silence? I counted seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then her voice came back colder. Do not talk to investigators without a lawyer. Why would I need a lawyer? The victim, I'm trying to protect you, she said, too fast. From what? Another pause in the background. I heard my stepfather's voice muffled. Then she said, I have to go. Your father needs me. I froze. Howard is my stepfather, I said quietly. Not my father. Click. The line went dead. I stared at my phone. Something shifted inside me. Not grief, clarity. Her panic was not about me. It was about her. I texted Ben. We need to talk. I have more. His reply came fast on. Tomorrow 9 a.m. I did not sleep, but this time it was not fear. It was the beginning of a plan. The next morning, my aunt called, my mother's sister, the one who always remembered birthdays. Honey, she said, your mom called me. She's worried about you. Worried about what? A delicate pause. She said you've been saying strange things. About the fire. About her. My stomach turned cold. I had not told anyone. Then my email pinged in HR. Message.urgent. We received an anonymous report expressing concern about your mental state following recent personal trauma. We need to schedule a meeting regarding your fitness for work. My mother was not just trying to steal money. She was trying to destroy my credibility first, so no one would believe me later. That is when anger entered my body. Like ice, cold, clear, controlled, not screaming anger, the kind that plans Ben. I went to my building manager. New security cameras had been installed. 2 months ago we watched the footage. There she was, my mother walking down my hallway with a large black bag at 2:07 p.m. and leaving at 5:12 p.m. 3 hours. She told me she'd stayed 30 minutes. Then I leaned closer. Where is the bag? We rewound. She walked in carrying it. She walked out empty-handed. We checked every angle. Service, entrance, stairwell, parking, no bag. She left it inside my apartment. Ben's jaw tightened. That bag matters. Then he showed me the lab photo. Charred, plastic, melted, wire, a digital timer, he said. The kind you plug into an outlet. My stomach dropped. Ben continued. We traced it. Bought at a hardware store 3 miles from your parents' house. 8 days before the fire. He pulled up grainy store footage. A woman at checkout. Brown hair. Familiar posture. My mother. I felt my pulse in my ears. I should have fallen apart instead. I felt calm, because now I had something my mother never expected me to have. Proof. I hired a lawyer. Her name is Tessa Lane. She speaks like she is cutting rope. She examined the beneficiary form. This signature is good, she said. Professional, but not perfect. She pointed to tiny hesitation marks. That is what forgery looks like. Your real signature flows. This one pauses then. She showed me the insurance office log. The form was submitted in person. The clerk remembered a woman, middle-aged, brown hair, claimed she handled paperwork for her daughter. Tessa leaned back. Your mother got too bold. I exhaled, slow. What now? Now we wait, Tessa said. People like this always move again. She was right. 3 days later, my mother called. Her voice was sweet. Nia, honey, the family is worried. I'm hosting a small gathering Sunday. Everyone wants to check on you. I heard the trap under the invitation, a room full of witnesses. A performance where she paints me unstable. A story where she is the loving mother and I am the broken daughter. She wanted to lock her version into their minds before the truth arrived. I'll be there, I said. She paused, then sounded relieved. Oh, good, that's wonderful. I hung up and texted Ben. She's gathering the audience, he replied. Do not confront her yet. I texted Tessa. We need the witness ID ready. She replied, already done. Clerk picked her from a lineup. No hesitation. Then Kayla told me something else. Her cousin worked in telecom legal. Deleted messages still exist in cloud backups. Subpoenas can retrieve them. My mother thought she could erase proof. By deleting texts, she did not know how modern evidence works. Sunday came, I parked outside my mother's house. 15 cars lined the driveway. 15 sets of eyes ready to pity me. My mother opened the door before I knocked. Green blouse, pearl earrings, concerned face like a mask. Nia, she said loudly, so everyone could hear. My poor baby. She hugged me too long, too tight. Inside, the living room was full. Aunties, uncles, cousins, all watching me like I was fragile glass. My aunt took my hands. It's okay to not be okay, she said softly. A cousin nodded. Anyone would struggle after a fire. Another suggested therapy. A professional. I looked at their faces, and I realized something painful. My mother had already been speaking. My mother had been shaping their minds for days. Then she cleared her throat and stood. I want to thank you all for coming, she began, voice trembling perfectly. As you know, Nia has been through something terrible. Murmurs. She dabbed her eyes. But there's something else we need to address. The room grew still. My daughter has been saying troubling things. She turned toward me like a wounded saint. She thinks we had something to do with the fire. Gasps. She looked around the room. I know she's hurting. I know she's traumatized. But to accuse us? My stepfather stepped forward and placed a hand on her shoulder. Our daughter is not well, he said flatly. We love her, but we can't enable delusions. All eyes turned to me. They waited for me to cry, to break down, to prove her story true by losing control. I did nothing. I stayed still. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. Ben warrant signed. Officers are with me. 20 minutes. I stood calmly. Excuse me, I said. I need some air. And I walked out, leaving my mother mid-performance. Ben parked 2 houses down. I got in. He showed me the full evidence packet. Hallway footage, bag in, no bag out. Timer remnants. Store footage. Witness ID and the warrant. This ends today, he said. I looked back at my mother's house through the window. I saw them moving. My mother likely telling them I was spiraling. I was unstable. I was broken. Ben checked his watch. 10 minutes? I nodded. Then I go back in. When I walked back inside, the room went silent. My mother turned to me and tried to smile. Nia, honey, are you feeling better? I met her eyes. Mama, I have a question. Her smile twitched. When you visited my apartment, why did you stay for 3 hours? She blinked. What? The building has cameras, I said calmly. I have the footage. My stepfather stepped forward. Nia, stop. You're embarrassing yourself. I ignored him. And the black bag you brought? Where did it go? Because you walked in with it, and you walked out without it. My mother's voice turned sharp. I don't know what you're talking about. The fire investigator knows, I said. The insurance company knows. My lawyer knows. The room went still in a way that felt different. Not pity. Attention. Real attention. Then her phone rang. My stepfather's phone rang too. They looked at each other. Fear flashed across both faces. The doorbell rang. My uncle opened it. Without thinking, Ben stepped inside with 2 officers. My mother went completely still. For the first time in my life. She looked small. Nia Brooks, Ben said, "You are under arrest for arson and insurance fraud." My mother's mouth opened. Nothing came out then. Her voice exploded. She set me up. "She's sick. She's unstable." Ben nodded calmly. "You have the right to remain silent." The handcuffs clicked. That sound did something to my body. It did not make me happy. It made me breathe. Because finally, someone else was holding the— Wait, my stepfather tried to speak. One officer stepped toward him. "Howard Brooks. We have questions for you too," he stammered. I wasn't. It was her idea." My mother screamed at him, "Shut up." But the room had already heard. 15 witnesses, 15 faces, watching the truth land. My aunt covered her mouth. My cousin looked sick. My uncle stared at the floor like he was ashamed to have ever doubted me. They led my mother out. She did not look back, and I realized something. She never saw me as a daughter. She saw me as a resource, a policy, a payout. After the police left, nobody spoke for a long moment. Then my aunt approached me with tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have listened." One by one, they tried to apologize. Some offered money, some offered support. But all I could think was this: where was this energy when I was outside in pajamas, watching my home burn? I nodded politely. "I need time," I said, "to figure out what family means." No one argued, because deep down, they understood. Family is not blood. Family is who protects you. Family is who believes you before proof is convenient. My mother took a plea deal: arson, fraud, forgery, conspiracy, 6 years. My stepfather cooperated: probation, treatment, community service. The insurance company reversed the beneficiary change. The payout came through after legal fees. It was not the full amount, but it was enough to restart still. Money does not rebuild your trust. Money does not return photos that burned. Money does not erase the sound of a man saying, "Not our problem." I moved into a smaller place. New locks, new camera, new silence. And for the first time in years, I learned how to sleep without waiting for danger. I started therapy. My therapist asked me one question that stayed in my bones. "Do you forgive her?" I thought for a long time. Then I said the truth. Forgiveness is not my job right now. Healing is. And that was the first time I felt like I was choosing myself without guilt. 2 months after sentencing, a letter came from prison. My mother's handwriting. She wrote excuses dressed as regret. She wrote about desperation. She wrote about debt. She wrote, "But you are still my baby." I read it twice. Then I set it down, and I did the hardest thing I have ever done. I did not reply. Because boundaries are not punishment. Boundaries are protection. I blocked prison mail. I renewed my restraining order. I removed every pathway she could use to reach me. That night, Kayla came over. We cooked simple food. Pasta, vegetables, quiet, music, nothing fancy, but safe. And safety feels expensive when you have lived without it. Now, I sit in my studio, looking out at city lights. 6 months since the fire. 4 months since court. A lifetime since I stopped believing family automatically means safe. Fire destroys. Everyone knows that. But here's what they do not tell you. Fire also reveals. It burns away masks. It burns away lies. It shows you who will let you choke and call it unfortunate. If you are watching this and your family makes you feel crazy for telling the truth, listen to me. You are not crazy. You are awake. And being awake is terrifying at first, but it is also the beginning of freedom. I am Nia Brooks, and my mother tried to burn my life down for money. She failed not because I was lucky, because I stopped protecting people who would never protect me. That is the lesson. You are allowed to save yourself, even from family. Especially from family. If this story touched you, drop a heart in the comments. If you have ever had to cut someone off for your peace, type I had to. And if you want more calm, real human stories about dignity, struggle, and delayed justice, subscribe to Mini Marvel Tales. I'm still here. And if you are going through something similar, you will be too.